everyone. Thank you for attending the third online meeting of the Alliance's 2017 Rapid Rehousing for Youth Learning Community. I'm Mindy Mitchell, Youth Homelessness Program and Policy Analyst here at the National Alliance in Homelessness. I'm so sad to tell you all that my brilliant and talented colleague Jen Saunders has moved on from the Alliance to other opportunities. Jen was instrumental in helping us to get this learning community started, and her contribution to the project is going to be sorely missed. So best of luck to you, Jen. We'll miss you. Thankfully, of course, we do have other awesome staff to jump in and help out here at the Alliance, and one of them, our Director for Families and Youth, Sharon McDonald, will be my co-pilot on the webinar today. Thanks, Sharon. And as always, we're so glad that you all could take a little time today to learn more from experienced youth rapid rehousing providers around the country about this great Housing First intervention for young people experiencing homelessness. But first, just a couple housekeeping tips about the webinar platform. All participants will be muted except for speakers and panelists during the presentations. But at any time during the webinar, you can enter questions for speakers into the question box on the right of your screen. And Sharon will be gathering your questions, and we'll be answering those, as many as we can, at the end of all the presentations. So today, of course, we're going to learn more about the topic that was ranked a close second after roommates that members of the learning community said they wanted to know more about in the youth rapid rehousing context, employment. And we've got an amazing panel of experts to share their wisdom on that topic. First, we're going to hear from Caitlin Schnurr from Heartland Alliance. Katie's done so much incredible work with Heartland on youth employment generally and on making employment an integral part of rapid rehousing. And she'll give us her top tips on how to implement best practices for both. We're also excited to have two great presenters to talk about how they connect young people in their rapid rehousing programs to training and employment opportunities. DeShonda Williams from Pathfinders in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Robin Meyer from Northwest Youth Services in beautiful Bellingham, Washington. We're also happy to have joining us for the Q&A portion of the webinar two other great youth rapid rehousing providers from the learning community, John Lawler from the Connection in Hartford, Connecticut, and Laura Foster from Bill Wilson Center in San Jose, California. And extra special today, we are psyched to have Chris Warland, who is also from Heartland Alliance, joining us during the Q&A portion to tell us more about specific issues around developing connections with your local workforce agencies. Okay, so today I'm briefly going to go over the core component that is, of course, most relevant for in the employment conversation and rapid rehousing context. Katie from Heartland Alliance is going to start us off talking about best practices in youth employment and how they connect to rapid rehousing. Next, DeShonda and Robin will tell us more about their youth employment approaches. Then, as usual, we'll have our provider Q&A panel to cover questions from you all about employment issues or any other questions you have related to implementing rapid rehousing for youth. And this time I'm calling it Ask a Provider Plus, because we are lucky enough to have the two great employment experts from Heartland, Caitlin and Chris, remaining with us during that segment. And finally, of course, I'll wrap up with next steps and some advocacy news related to some really important proposed healthcare legislation that you may have heard about this week. And as always, just a quick check-in on the reasons why we're all here as part of this learning community. Rapid rehousing for youth, totally doable, and we're all here to learn more and get better at it. And like last time, I'm just going to do a quick review of rapid rehousing and the core component that's most relevant when we're thinking about getting young people in rapid rehousing connected to training and employment opportunities, and that's case management. Of course, rapid rehousing is an intervention designed to help people exit homelessness quickly, return to permanent housing in the community, and make connections to mainstream services that help them maintain that housing. One of the great things about rapid rehousing is that it's a housing first intervention, which means it provides housing to people experiencing homelessness without preconditions such as sobriety or minimum income levels. Additionally, Housing First services are voluntary. This does not mean that Housing First is housing only and that services are not provided. It just means that our service philosophy shifts so that the burden for client engagement resides with the provider rather than the client, and that housing is not withheld or rewarded depending on service participation. And of course, rapid rehousing consists of these three core components. And maybe the most important core component for young people in general in rapid rehousing is case management and services. And that's particularly true when we're talking about employment. Rapid rehousing case management and services includes all these important features, but connecting young people to resources, especially training and employment resources, is super important for ensuring their success while they're in rapid rehousing and especially after financial assistance ends. So we're going to find out more about that. Again, we're so pleased to have the folks from Heartland Alliance here with us today. And Caitlin Schnur is going to kick things off with an overview of the most important things to think about when it comes to youth employment. And remember, you can enter questions into the text box on the right of your screen, but we'll be holding answers until all of the presenters are finished. Okay, Katie, are you ready?
Okay, yes, I am ready. And now,
I unmuted
now I'm unmuted as well. Thank you. Thanks so much, Mindy, for that introduction. And I'll go ahead and get started, so I can just go to the next slide, please. So just by way of really brief introduction, again, my name is Caitlin Schnur. I'm a policy associate at Heartland Alliance's National Initiatives on Poverty and Economic Opportunity. Next slide. And to give just a little bit of background on our team and who we are, Heartland Alliance is about a 130-year-old human rights and social service organization that's headquartered in Chicago. Our national initiatives team is housed in our research and policy department, and we are focused on ending chronic unemployment and poverty. We work in the federal policy advocacy space as well as on field building efforts or technical assistance, so such as delivering trainings like today's webinar. Next slide. We run a number of different national initiatives, but the work that might be most relevant to folks on the call today is our National Center on Employment and Homelessness, which works to ensure that employment and quality jobs is a key element in preventing and ending homelessness, both for youth and adults. Next slide, please. All right, so I wanted to jump right in and just give a little bit of background on where the information that I'm presenting today is coming from. So primarily I'm drawing from two different papers that my team has released, one of which is on promising practices and principles for helping youth facing significant barriers to employment succeed in work, and the other is about integrating rapid rehousing and employment. And Mindy will make links to both of these resources available to you, and they're also free via our website. So there's lots more contained in these two papers that I won't get to today, just given the time limit. But as you can see, these papers do have different audiences. So our Opportunity Youth paper is generally targeted towards stakeholders in the workforce development system. And our Rapid Rehousing brief is, again, generally targeted towards folks in the homeless services system. So I'm drawing from both, and I do think that although our Opportunity Youth paper is kind of directed towards people whose background isn't necessarily in housing, that the principles and practices I'll lift up are applicable whether you're seeking to offer employment services either through partnerships or if you're in a position about thinking about launching or already are running kind of your own employment programming in-house. One thing that these papers have in common is their methodology. So both were drawn from existing research and evaluation data as well as in-depth interviews with providers in the field. When it comes to our Opportunity Youth paper, I would say about half of the providers we interviewed were actually running workforce development services specifically for young people experiencing homelessness. And then on the rapid rehousing side, everyone who we interviewed was incorporating employment into their service delivery to some extent, either through partnerships and referrals or through in-house services. So hopefully that's some helpful background, and we can go on to the next slide. All right, so number one is about building robust partnerships to offer a continuum of employment training and related supportive services that can meet a wide range of needs. One of our key takeaways of our rapid rehousing and employment brief is that while rapid rehousing providers definitely can and should prioritize employment and make it a goal for participants, we don't actually expect rapid rehousing providers to all go out and launch kind of their own robust employment programming. That's not necessarily realistic. We also learned through our interviews that there's really not a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to meeting employment, training, and supportive services needs of rapid rehousing participants. So really, every young person is going to need different resources in order to be successful in employment. So for these reasons, we know that partnerships with multiple actors are critical, and we also think that COC leadership really has a role to play in helping to develop necessary partnerships. Who best to partner with in your area to build, again, what we're thinking of as this kind of continuum of employment-related supports is going to depend on some different factors. So in some communities, we know that the American Job Center through the public workforce system may be a good partner, but that can also depend on the priorities of local workforce investment boards or who's running that American Job Center. And on the next slide, I'm going to take a little bit of a deeper dive around strategies for building, oh, sorry, still on the first slide. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about building out those partnerships. But I would say it's definitely important to establish partnerships outside of the public workforce system through American Job Centers. So for example, there may be existing community-based organizations that specialize in delivering workforce development services either to young people or even to young people experiencing homelessness. Those are certainly going to be really valuable partners. Other recommended partnerships, and again, they're more detailed within our rapid rehousing paper, but that may be especially relevant for youth include community colleges, health and mental health care providers, providers who specialize in financial capability services, and agencies that can offer credential-bearing training that has the potential for advancement opportunities. So in sum, it's really important to look around, identify partners, and be prepared to make referrals based on the employment needs and interests of young people in rapid rehousing, again, with this awareness that there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Next slide, please. So I wanted to take a little bit of a deeper dive into establishing relationships with local workforce investment boards and American Job Centers. So by way of background, since I'm not sure if some of these terms are new to folks on the call, local workforce investment boards are also known as WIBs, and they effectively oversee and manage the local and regional public workforce system, and I would think of them as roughly analogous to continuum of care boards. So these workforce investment boards do things like analyze regional workforce development needs, engage with employers, and also identify and promote strategies and initiatives to help meet the employment needs of job seekers, again, including youth. And then American Job Centers are really the actual places where job seekers would show up to meet with staff and gain access to employment services. So this is going to get a little bit wonky, but American Job Centers and Workforce Investment Boards are both governed by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WIOA. And this is legislation that was passed in 2014 that really aimed to reorient the public workforce system towards better meeting the needs of both adults and youth who face barriers to employment. In the youth space, the passage and implementation of WIOA is kind of especially noteworthy because under the legislation, the public workforce system has to spend at least 75% of state and local workforce dollars on young people who are out of school. And that includes young people who are out of school because they're experiencing homelessness. So this means that to meet those targeting requirements, the system has a real incentive to be building relationships and referral partners with programs like rapid rehousing programs that are serving those young people who likely face significant barriers to work. So a few quick ideas on how to facilitate those relationships. And again, my colleague Chris is on the line to answer additional questions about this. One is what we just call cross-pollination of systems leadership. So having someone from the COC sit on the workforce board and vice versa. It's a way to coordinate between systems and make sure that each system is aware of the other's work and has a stake in its outcomes. Co-location of frontline staff is another option. So this could mean having someone who's housed at the American Job Center whose role is to specifically identify and serve young people experiencing homelessness. So someone from a rapid rehousing program could work out of the American Job Center a few days per week and be on hand to really help connect young people to appropriate workforce services. And finally, there's cross-training. So the public workforce system certainly has a lot to learn about the employment and economic opportunity needs of young people experiencing homelessness. And again, just best practices for serving this specific population. On the flip side, we think that homeless service providers also have a lot to learn about available workforce development services, their strategies, and just kind of the language of the public workforce system. So there's certainly opportunities to host cross-training events that could be beneficial on both ends and help to build those relationships. It can go to the next slide, please. So to get back to our rapid rehousing and employment findings, another key takeaway for us was really the importance of engaging rapid rehousing participants in employment services as soon as they're enrolled in rapid rehousing. And again, that can be through in-house services or through partnerships. Of course, one of the practical reasons for doing this is that the rapid rehousing rental subsidy is time limited and young people will be expected to pay rent at the end of that subsidy. And we also know that in many cases, young people have limited work experience, so having the most time possible to work on employment and training related goals is definitely important. In addition to kind of this practical aspect of quickly connecting young people to employment, we also see the suggestion as rooted in an important service delivery principle that we're calling an employment first approach. And we're really thinking of employment first as analogous to housing first. So housing first teaches us that people don't have to go through a bunch of hoops before they can be housed and before they can be successful in housing, but that those barriers can be addressed once a person is in housing. And we think that it's the same with work. You can start looking for a job or actually working as you're addressing those barriers to employment. So an employment first approach really means coming at this work from a strengths-based approach that assumes employability and that honors consumer choice. So when a young person expresses interest in employment or taking a class, even if you're not sure if they're ready, you still run with it. And you make sure that you're really listening to that young person's job interests or passions and are able to work with them individually or again make an appropriate referral to meet those interests. So in sum, we think that rapid rehousing providers can help young people begin to engage with work or enroll in training as quickly as possible and then provide those skill development and supportive services along the way. And there are also some specific workforce development models, on this next slide, that kind of embrace this approach and can facilitate rapid attachment to earned income. Also, Mindy, I know that I'm over time, but I'll just power through this slide and maybe quickly through the last one. Okay, if that's okay. So offering or connecting to paid workforce development opportunities. Connecting young people to paid workforce development opportunities, which I would say as opposed to, for example, only engaging youth in approaches like unpaid job readiness training or resume preparation courses is important for a number of reasons. And one of those reasons is just that the opportunity to earn income is a really strong incentive to get youth engaged in employment services and to keep them engaged. And just to clarify here, I'm thinking about paid workforce development opportunities that may exist again, through partnerships in the community or possibly maybe started by a rapid rehousing program in-house as part of the suite of services available to young people. And again, as I discussed a little bit earlier, that's really going to depend on the capacity of your community and your program itself. But I do think it's important that whenever possible, youth in rapid rehousing have the chance to earn income while also gaining workplace skills that can help prepare them for the competitive labor market. So 2 evidence-based workforce development models that might be especially beneficial to youth in rapid rehousing are transitional jobs programs and social enterprise strategies. These models actually have a lot in common. So they both pay wages and they provide young people an opportunity to what we call learn how to work by working in a real world setting while also offering wraparound support. These interventions are both time limited, so a young person might be in this type of programming for a few months before beginning to seek competitive employment. And a key difference is really that a transitional jobs program might place a young person with an external employer, so an employer partner in the community, and then subsidize that young person's wage, whereas a social enterprise is its own business that's operated by a social service provider, so young people are working for that business rather than an external employer. But again, both transitional jobs and social enterprises are spaces where young people can develop soft skills within a safe environment, as well as identify strengths and barriers and start to work through them. And I'm up on my last slide here, which is, I just wanted to wrap up by quickly touching on a few employment program service delivery principles that are important when it comes to delivering workforce services to youth experiencing homelessness. So again, our paper covers a lot more, but when you think about identifying appropriate employment program partners, or again, if you're thinking about developing these services in-house, these are a few principles to think about. One is around engaging young people for as long as it takes. So we know that a rapid rehousing rental subsidy is time limited by its very nature. But when it comes to success in employment, that can be a longer process for some people. So many employment programs that target opportunity youth or youth experiencing homelessness have engagement periods that can last up to 3 or even 4 years. So in seeking partners or offering your own services, it's important to just think beyond that rental subsidy window. Second is just the importance of offering young people multiple chances to quote unquote fail and try again. It's not necessarily realistic to expect a young person to get everything right when it comes to work the first time, and really successful youth employment programs recognize that young people are going to, get mess up on the job, get fired, get asked to leave, even a transitional jobs placement, and they plan for that and view that as part of a learning and change process rather than an indication that someone can't be successful in work. And finally, last point, we hear time and again from employment providers that taking therapeutic concepts and applying them to employment has been an effective approach. So this can include therapeutic tools such as cognitive behavioral therapy, motivational interviewing, understanding stages of change, and trauma-informed care. And we see providers using these tools in practical ways like helping young people build confidence around their work search, identify where someone's at in that process of engaging in the workforce, and then support commitments to employment, and also skills like how to manage conflict potentially in the workplace. So I'm sorry that I was over time. I'm going to end there, and again, we'll be available during the Q&A. Thanks, Mindy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Katie. Such great information. And everybody remember that we'll be linking to all the great Heartland Alliance resources on employment in your next Rapid Rehousing for Youth Learning Community newsletter that'll be coming out after this webinar. And also, Katie and her colleague Chris from Heartland are both going to be a part of today's Q&A panel. So next up, we have, hang on, let me work on the mute here. Yep, that worked. Okay, next up we have DeShonda Williams from Pathfinders in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is one of the great longtime rapid rehousing for youth providers who have been founders of the work of this learning community. DeShonda, we're so glad to have you on the webinar, and can you just say hi so I can make sure that I got your audio right?
Hi.
Yay, it worked. Okay, now I'll start your slides, and you'll tell us more about the employment work that y'all do at Pathfinder.
Okay.
There we go.
All right, so I am Deshonda Williams. I'm the program manager in our drop-in center, where we work creative for and by youth ages 11 to 25 experiencing homelessness, particularly those youth struggling to transition into adulthood due to trauma, mental health concerns, chronic homelessness, or aging out of system services such as foster care. We are in our second year of implementing our actual employment program, Pathways to Employment. The drop-in center already operates according to the evidence-based Housing First model to end homelessness, which treats safe and sustainable housing as an essential fundamental tool for success and stability rather than as a reward for goal attainment, improved functioning, or other program compliance. So already operating from a trauma-informed lens and trauma-informed service provision to provide youth safety and support progress towards the goals youth have identified. We have applied the same concept from Housing First into implementing an Employment First model when youth identify employment as primary. Pathways to Employment is internally how we refer to our employment program. Although we serve young people experiencing home instability, upon intake we more commonly hear youth reporting employment as a primary goal. They say that money and income, their financial security, that is essential to their stability. So having access to money is a huge motivator from our youth reports. Approximately 60% of the 500 or so youth that access our program every year engage in intensive case management where they identify their goals, next steps, and other needs with regard to housing, mental health, substance use, employment, and education. We are very much aware of the current state of poverty in our community, the impact of stress, racism, homophobia, and many additional societal and quality of life issues that increase the likelihood of youth and young adults accessing our services and programs here at Pathfinders. All things that can create barriers to them accessing employment and other life functions. The youth we see report being banned or rejected from other agencies and services, Pathfinders being their last hope as a young person still eligible for youth services and whose behaviors are seen as disruptive, aggressive, and dangerous because they are runaway or homeless youth, because they're coping and dealing with racism, abuse, violence, and exploitation. Our program culture is ingrained with operating through a trauma lens. Prior to implementing our program, we assess the readiness of communities, youth agencies that employ youth, employers, youth of various backgrounds, so non-gender conforming young people, young people that identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, youth of color, and we gave them assessments to see where they felt the community was in regards to employing youth. The feedback that we received was that youth don't feel trusted, and also from employers, they reported that they didn't feel like they can trust youth to take on the positions that they had to offer. They felt that youth were lazy and basically weren't capable to be committed long-term to employment. Something that we've seen is that our youth can access jobs, they can get jobs, and a part of their barriers interrupt them from being able to maintain those jobs. We also held focus groups and learned that youth just wanted to be trusted with the opportunity to work, and they want to feel like valued members of society. In our environment, we see it as a perfect opportunity to support young people in their responses to trauma, being super respectful of their needs, supportive of their readiness and what that looks like individually, providing a safe and trusting environment, showing up and being consistent, and most importantly, being able to hold youth accountable without harsh consequences like just completely losing a job or completely losing housing. We also operate under a team case management model. So outside of the case managers in the drop-in center, there's support from supported housing, Street Beat, which is our street outreach program, our youth shelter, our New Paths program that supports the needs of youth in the sex trade or experiencing some form of being trafficked. We also have peers on staff, which helps to increase the hope for employment, long-term employment, and also as a way to support our own employment program efforts as an agency. When youth come in for intake into the drop-in center and identify employment goals, we introduce our employment program and expectations right away. We give them tools that will help them function in a regular job. So we go over the paperwork that they need to be completely reading through. They need to be keeping track of hours. They need to be keeping track of pay, who they should be communicating with. And we work through things like that might seem simple and a given for most people. For the young people that we serve, we work through how to be able to do something like that when you don't have when you're not used to having stability or having a stable place to stay, or getting a stable place to stay and learning how to keep up with your own business. The job readiness assessment helps us to identify the skills that youth have, helps youth to identify their skills or where they feel they need improvement, which is also a part of their intake into our employment program. And this also serves as a guide to implement employment readiness groups such as mock interviews, resume writing, elevator speeches, which we have also been able to bring in youth-friendly employers to help provide some of that support and training as well. The trigger assessment, it allows for us to dive a little bit deeper into trauma, not explicitly going over their history of trauma, but what triggers that young person emotionally, physically, and environmentally. We look at their goals and the compatibility of their goals with their triggers, and working with them on creating a coping plan and understanding together what can we work on first and what's realistic to work on given your goals and what your triggers are and how those can kind of work together or not work together. Also through observation and working with youth. So with our supported employment groups, which are job developments that we've created within our agency. So youth have access to commercial custodial training when they can do those shifts in our Southeastern Education Center school. At our youth shelter, they can be exposed to residential custodial training. They can get clerical training. They can get clothing and retail and stocking training on site here. And so through those observations, we can, as staff, rate where youth are skills-wise and where those youth have identified they would like to be, and continue to rate them every few months in the program as they progress, or if they're staying the same, or if there's some challenges with moving forward with some of those skills that they've identified that they needed or that they would need for the goals that they wish to obtain. We look at those and we use those to give them feedback when we do see them on the internal job development shifts, and we work with them on improving those skills. Also, when youth are regularly engaged with drop-in center program staff, they are consistently engaged around their employment goals as far as job searching, interviews, how to communicate with people that they probably aren't getting along with, what jobs would be good for them to start, things of that nature. We've also been able to take this program, given the feedback and focus groups from young people, and host 2 job fairs. So the job fair that we just hosted June 13th, we were able to see 29 employers and employment support agencies that can help be a bridge instead of a barrier to young people accessing work. We've seen 100 youth this past June, and last year we've seen about 200. We also provide incentives to young people that are involved in our internal job development or supported employment program. They can earn $10 per hour, and they are paid at the end of the week via Walmart gift cards. And so this entire program, so although we've always been at a capacity to work with youth on employment readiness or getting youth housed and helping them to access employment services or meeting their financial needs, this program basically has allowed for us to deepen the intensity of services and intensity of trauma-informed practices into our existing team case management model.
Is that the last one, Deshauna?
I think that is it. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, like us on LinkedIn.
Yep, because Pathfinders is awesome. Thank you so much, DeShonda, and I'm so glad we were able to figure out my technology glitches, especially now that I don't have Jen. We do always love learning about all the incredible work that's going on at Pathfinders. Next, we have one of the first youth rapid rehousing experts that I was lucky enough to meet when I was just getting started here at the Alliance, Robin Meyer from Northwest Youth Services. So, Robin, I am unmuting you, and tell us about how Northwest Youth Services connects young people with employment.
All right, thanks, Mindy, and thanks everybody for spending some of your morning or afternoon with us. So I have been really, just excited and happy to hear kind of from Caitlin and DeShonda, and it is fun to hear just kind of things that are universal across the board. So a lot of this might actually be repetitive. So I'm going to cruise through some of it because I might have overkilled for my time. So anyway, I'm with Northwest Youth Services. Our mission is to collaborate with at-risk, runaway, and homeless youth to foster self-reliance. And that attitude of collaboration and just holding youth as able really carries through everything that we do. So our vocational approach is similar to our housing approach. It's always strengths-based, really focused on what does the youth bring as resources to when they're to the process of searching for employment. Our focus is on learning. So as DeShonda mentioned, just really providing that safe environment for youth to move through experiences, and whether that ends with a quote unquote success or quote unquote failure, that really our objective is to make sure it's a shame-free experience that they get to learn from and grow through. Detailed, I would say, is another kind of principle of our work. When I was talking with the case managers the other day about what they wanted me to highlight in this talk, they talked about how just being really upfront with what the expectations are of employment, and helping them understand those details and documenting it and writing it down and asking good questions, down to, if a youth knows that they prefer to work in the morning or in the evening or overnights, just really trusting, again, that a youth knows what's going to work best for them and asking those questions up front. And persistent, so both on the youth part, that they're persistent in continuing to share with us that employment is a goal or income is a goal. And sometimes youth use that language interchangeably. A youth might not say they want a job, but they want money, right? And so how do we both translate and listen well? Next slide. So the three different approaches that our in-house vocational readiness program uses is one-on-one support. So we have a vocational specialist who meets one-on-one with young people, both in the jail and here at our office, to do resume building, mock interviews, working through applications, or just kind of job coaching, confidence building activities. We also have a We Grow Garden, which I'll talk more about later, and then we have Youth Jobs, which is that transitional employment program where we partner with local businesses and organizations to provide a 90-day employment opportunity that we subsidize. Next slide. So the one-on-one support, again, just focuses on identifying the educational and vocational goals of the young person, building resumes, doing the job search, really providing the tangible materials to look for a job, right? Internet access, computer, printer, information about what a strong resume or cover letter looks like, practicing those interviewing skills, and then we also do vocational jail outreach. So if we have young people who've been involved with our street outreach team and then maybe are in jail for one reason or another, we can provide this continuity of care, and we don't say that experience of them being in jail is going to disrupt anything that we've been working with them on. It will create additional barriers to employment, clearly, but not anything that's unachievable. Next slide. So this is our We Grow Garden. So it's a hands-on learning in a garden space that we manage. We actually just moved our program from something that was on site, and it was a tiny little space next to our office. And just this spring, we were able to increase the size and the space 5 times to 5 times as big, with partnerships through a lot of businesses in our community who donated lumber and time and design work. and all of that. And so Comcast did actually a community Comcast Cares Day work party and built this new garden in a day. We're really thankful for that. But the youth basically learn how to garden. They learn some practical skills about just getting along with other people, communication, engaging with customers. We do a market stand every week as well, so they can learn to do cashiering and some basic just accounting. In all of the work there at the garden, we especially are using that trauma-informed care approach and positive youth development principles. This is the opportunity that we find most successful for youth who really appear to have a long way to go before they're maybe going to be successful in traditional employment, whether that's for reasons of trauma or mental health or substance abuse. It's just a very safe entry-level way to start building the confidence and have experiences that they can feel proud of. This also gives back to the community. We donate food to the Bellingham Food Bank. In past years, other community restaurants have bought produce from this as well. So it's also an opportunity for youth to have a different experience in their community and be seen in a positive light. And that goes a really long way. I think the biggest thing that we see as a barrier to employment is the confidence in the young person's ability, their own confidence in their own ability. The desire is there, but their experience has not lined up with the fact that they are a valued member of their community, and then that's going to match with what an employer is looking for. So this is one of our best opportunities to kind of rebuild some of that and help a youth have a different experience. Next slide. These are some pictures from that project that we worked on. We have youth leadership positions in this program for youth who have done this for a couple of years, and then we are able to offer about 5 positions every year to young people. Next slide. Youth jobs, so it's a 3-month job placement in both of our Whatcom and Skagit offices. So in our office, we have a youth employed as a janitor, groundskeeper, managing donations from volunteers, sorting materials, really anything that we can think of to have a youth do, we want to offer that opportunity, both in I don't know the right word, but not just technical, but really like valuable work experience that they're going to be able to take with them when they're done. Sorry, my computer's. So they work about 12 hours per week and get paid at $11 an hour. Our agency does subsidize that payroll, so the company or the business that's employing them does the supervision in partnership with our program manager, but we are actually paying the wages. We do require that there's a couple of steps that happen, one being that they do a resume, an interview, and an orientation to the program, going back to that detail, the principle of really walking through what are the expectations of the program, what's the employer going to want to see as far as communication and showing up on time and work ethic while they're there. And our attitude in that is that this is going to be a growing and learning opportunity. So there's a signed contract between the employer, the youth, and Northwest Youth Services. And the youth employment goals and benchmarks are talked about and documented between them and the vocational support specialist, so we can really see if they feel like they're moving towards progress in what they wanted to learn. It's a great support for transition to the community or outside employment. We've definitely had employers who started with the youth through this youth jobs program and then hired the youth on full-time afterwards. We work with other nonprofits in town also, one of them being Habitat for Humanity. Next slide. So how it works with rapid rehousing, we talk about, the stair steps don't always just go up. Sometimes they go up and down. And this also can be kind of a cyclical process as youth are learning. So they do the application and mock interviews and goal setting, and then they start working, whether in one of our in-house programs or a referral to a community youth job. And then they're building and updating their resume and continuing to look for work, and ideally transitioning into community employment. Next step, next slide. There's a lot of partnership between programs. I think DeShonda mentioned also, as soon as somebody comes into their drop-in center, they're doing that intake and talking about vocational services. We do the same thing. As soon as our street outreach team makes contact with somebody and they express income or employment as a goal, we connect them both with our housing interest pool and the vocational resources. So those are not contingent on receiving housing services to receive vocational services. And we start doing that relationship building and helping the youth understand that this is a safe environment and making sure that we're making it a safe environment. And then the housing case managers immediately refer to our vocational program as well as do one-on-one work with their clients I'll talk about in just a moment. And then the housing case managers also refer to mental health services, whether that's crisis intervention or ongoing service connection, as mental health can be a barrier to maintaining employment. Case management support, the thing I loved the most about what the case managers were talking with me about is that youth sometimes come in with some really grand ideas and some big, wonderful, beautiful goals for their life, and that's a fabulous place to start the conversation of what are the transferable skills that they can start gaining to get there. And so breaking apart short and long-term goals and never negating whatever that long-term goal or that big dream is that they're working towards. For youth that are living in crisis day to day, there's a lot of power behind kind of what it is exactly that gets them up every morning. And so if we are shutting that down, I don't think that's actually serving them. And then also kind of stepping, breaking it down into bite-sized pieces and figuring out what are the practical, attainable steps to take that's going to get them there. Having really clear and direct discussions about financial needs and budgeting. Obviously, with rapid rehousing, they are responsible for a portion of rent. And so it's just being honest about when rent is due and what happens if they don't pay, if they prioritize something else above rent. Balancing the employment and educational goals. So if a young person is working, part-time or full-time in fast food, but their dream is to be a nurse, how do we honor both of those pieces? That income is necessary and this longer-term goal is a priority for them. We work on conviction letters and then address practical needs like transportation, clothing, and tools for whatever job they're accessing. Experience-oriented learning and growth, I think the other presenters talked a lot about that. I would just echo that's critical in, I think, what makes vocational services successful. And detailed information about employer expectations. I spoke about that earlier also. I was reading an article by J.T. Fest about drop-in spaces and high versus low barrier, and I think that principle really applies to employment as well, where he says high expectations is one of the 3 primary protective factors that fosters innate resilience and promotes development outcomes. And so I think in our case management, we attempt to hold both a low barrier and high expectations, and again, just holding the youth as truly able and capable of being employed in a way that's meaningful to them. We also do community referrals to the Goodwill. They have a great job training program here in our community, WorkSource. The Department of Vocational Rehabilitation is a big one for us. We serve a number of youth that have disabilities, and so the process here in town is really accessible for young people, and we've had a lot of success with them getting support into community jobs through them as well. Growing Alliances, which is another nonprofit in town that works with youth formerly in foster care, and then temporary employment agencies. Next slide. Challenges, these probably everybody's familiar with. Youth that have criminal histories, we do the conviction letter and kind of the elevator speech work. Substance abuse and mental health barriers. These are typically addressed through that employment first idea, that a young person can still be employed even if they have mental health barriers. And the way that shows up practically, where that's going to show up for them, they're going to learn best by experiencing it and then addressing it in a safe environment. Commitment to a contractor job. We do have youth who don't complete their, youth jobs contracts, and we work through them and with the employer on those. And then just practical barriers like illness or transportation. We know youth who have experienced trauma or have unaddressed medical needs are going to be ill more often than maybe somebody who has all of their basic needs met. And so just talking with them about how they intend to handle that when that comes up, and talking with employers about that as a reality. And then just the reality of prioritizing new expenses as well. When a young person gets that first paycheck, whether it's $30 or $100, talking with them about how they prioritize rent or their electricity bill. Next slide. And this is the last one. Successes. So last year we served about 95 youth in our vocational program. I think one of the biggest successes is just for the community to get a different image of what a youth's experience is while they're homeless, and how motivated many young people are to end that homeless experience, and for a youth to get to be really adding value in a way that they want to be and seen, and building their confidence. And obviously youth are getting jobs, which is a huge success. They get safe learning opportunities, We had a youth who was who worked as a janitor here and then moved on to work in an apartment complex with one of our partner organizations and is loving that work and now looking to go to school. So I think partnering with TANF as well, we've worked with the Work First program, so that's another way to access those mainstream resources to support whatever internal work you're doing. And that is the end of what I've got. Thank you, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Robin. And thanks to Northwest Youth Services always for being so present in this work and so committed to never giving up on young people. You all always inspire me. I know that we are running over schedule, and I have asked all of our presenters if they can to stay on a little later, and I'd like to ask all of you attendees if you can to stay on so that we can have a pretty robust Q&A here. We did have a lot of great questions, and we're getting to those. Also, it has come to my attention that we are not all crazy cat ladies in this learning community, so I want to make sure all of you who are dog persons know that your questions are welcome too. Sharon has been compiling all these questions, and now we're going to have John Lawler, Laura Foster, and Chris Warland join Caitlin, DeShonda, and Robin to help answer as many of these questions as possible. I'm going to unmute everybody, I think. I'm going to try to unmute everybody. Crap. Okay. I'm unmuting everybody. Okay, I think I unmuted everybody. First question that we had, a lot of folks were asking about employer engagement. And Chris, I think I want to have you start the answers on this by working in your particular area of expertise, which is for providers to learn more about workforce investment boards, connecting with workforce investment boards, and how that helps them connect to employers.
Sure. So I can speak generally a little bit about what we've learned about building relationships with workforce investment boards, and then if there are specific questions about employer engagement or employer engagement techniques, I have to address those as well. But what we've really found is that you know, because the composition of workforce boards varies so much from area to area, and because some of the goals and orientations and priorities of those boards can vary quite a bit, that you know, the approaches that you might want to take toward partnership you know, might vary somewhat as well. But it's important to note that you know, one of the good changes that occurred under WIOA is that there is sort of an explicit permission for workforce investment boards to include representatives from community-based organizations that have specialized knowledge in employing individuals with barriers to employment, and that would include opportunity youth and people experiencing homelessness. And so you may be able to advocate for a position on the leadership board to actually influence the priorities and decisions that are made. When it comes to you know, making sure that the people that we're serving receive good and appropriate service through the public system, there are a number of ways to go about it. It's really important to educate your local workforce board about the characteristics and needs of the population that you're serving. And so you know, I think that when I speak with people who represent workforce boards or who work at American Job Centers and ask them about the percentage of people who are coming in the door seeking services who are homeless or unstably housed, for example, I often hear from them that yes, a lot are. But they could use some, you know, both data on the prevalence of the population that you're serving. They can use information about the specific employment needs that they might have that you can help with. And it's really, really good to help educate. Workforce boards do, and the one-stops or American Job Centers that they support do have lots and lots of employer partners, a lot of employer contacts, but they may be pretty protective of those contacts and may be reluctant to jeopardize relationships. So it's really important to educate them about the benefits of employing the young people that you're working with, and to talk to them about the ways in which it could be good for the businesses to consider, like tapping into the labor pool that you have available to them. So that's important as well. And then there are specific, models for helping improve access to the public workforce system that include, for example, as Caitlin mentioned, offering co-location. And co-location can work a number of different ways, but really it's just about having cross-pollination of staff so that the people with expertise are able to serve the job seekers, at the point, when they need service. So you might have, a workforce specialist located at a housing program, or you might have an individual who is a specialist in providing employment services to people experiencing homelessness at an American Job Center that might not ordinarily have that expertise. So there are a number of ways to do that. And there's also the employment navigator model, in which there's an individual whose job it is to make sure that, in this case, youth experiencing homelessness would have access to appropriate services and, understand how to navigate the system in order to access those services. So I know that was a little bit of a long answer. I apologize, but I'm happy to talk about employer engagement if there's specific questions as well.
That's awesome. Thank you, Chris. Always lots of great information. I'd like to go ahead and throw that question out to our provider panel too. Can each of you kind of talk about the work that you do in your programs with employer engagement? One thing that I have found really cool listening to all of you talk is the parallels between employment engagement, employment first, all of that kind of stuff, and what makes it work well, and also what makes rapid rehousing work well. So landlord engagement, employer engagement, housing first, employment first. Having a housing navigator, having an employment navigator. So this has been really, really cool for me to see all the parallels. I want to give John and Laura a chance to pipe in since we have the presentations from our other great providers. John, you want to start us off talking about what you all do at the Connection as far as employer engagement goes?
Sure. I would say that we wouldn't necessarily have any real formal process for that. We do rely pretty heavily on community workforce providers and kind of working through the relationships that they already have in place. But when a youth is willing to let us kind of engage with someone who they are currently employed through, we usually just try to do a bit of a shared supervision feedback model as well, where we get to address certain things that the employer needs to see improve, work on, et cetera. We also do have some relationships where we can get some of our youth into kind of unpaid internship experiences, just so they can start to develop some of the soft skills, get some of the resume building going as well. So we have a few of those that we've been able to work into our program.
Awesome, thank you. Laura, how about at Bill Wilson Center?
So at Bill Wilson Center and really in our community, one of the ways that employers are engaged is we're very fortunate that we have a group of people that are working with Opportunity Youth, and so we're actually partnered with a group of people who are working on an Opportunity Youth partnership, and so they're the ones actually out in the community engaging the employers, and then we're engaging with them to make referrals, to do what we can to make sure youth are ready for different types of employment. So depending on what a youth's skills are, we're sort of looking at what that youth has and then connecting them to the right level of employment. And the Opportunity Youth Partnership has gone out into the community and has signed sort of MOUs or agreements with employers in the community to say, they've done the work to say these are the benefits of hiring these young people, and do you at least agree that when we're telling you we're sending them somebody that you'll at least give them an interview, right? Nobody's guaranteeing employment, but they're willing to say, yes, we'll give them an interview, we'll give them a shot, because sometimes that's just what the youth need, is that opportunity to get that foot in the door to sort of, sell themselves. And so we're partnering with people in our community in that way. And our rapid rehousing programs, we've had a couple of grants where we've been able to write in at least a part-time person to be an employment or education specialist. And so those people are just now starting to engage in the community with employers. And so that's another piece where we've recently said, like, this is something we need, so let's get a staff person who can be focused on that. So we're not just relying on the partnerships in the community, community. We're doing both.
Awesome, thank you. Another question that a lot of folks had, and of course this is, is about helping young people maintain jobs once they get them. So I think what I'd like to do for this one is just the whole provider panel, and DeShonda, we'll start with you and let you kick off this round. Just talk about, from your experience, lessons learned about helping young people maintain the jobs that they acquire in your program, or maybe they don't maintain the same job, but they are able to maintain their income. So just lessons learned on that, and maybe some helpful tips for folks who are just getting started doing this work.
So some lesson learned is definitely having that relationship with a young person. So they will probably already have it with us, but us being able to have a relationship with the employer is always good. When we can't, the employers that we've been able to communicate with and definitely advocate on behalf of youth as we would, like with housing and other housing programs, and just kind of bridging that youth-friendly language that we use and the assessments that we have, and being able to talk to them like, this is how we know this young person. They come to us often, which means that they're ready to take action, they're ready to move forward, and just really being a big advocate for that young person. There are employers that are willing to have that conversation ongoing with us, and there are some that are like, okay, for now, we can't work with this person, and we will follow up with you to bring them back, and we've had good experiences with that as well. And it's really just the lessons we've learned is really just being able to build those relationships with those employers, because I think that's the most challenging thing. According to our community readiness assessment, they feel just how you feel that they're not trusting, and employers have a hard time trusting young people with accessing employment services. So yeah, we try to just build a relationship with those employers so that they are willing to work with those youth ongoing through their barriers and challenges that they are dealing with due to trauma.
That's great. Yeah, that's something that stuck out for me during your presentation is young people don't feel trusted, and they have a really good reason not to feel trusted, because employers are saying they don't trust young people. And I think that's a really powerful role that a provider can play in rebuilding that trust and making those connections. Robin, how about for you? Lessons learned from helping young people maintain employment, or at least maintain income?
Yeah, I think the lesson learned, the first one that kind of comes to mind is just how in our internal programs we try to model as much as possible what a youth might experience if they are looking for employment out in the community. So, I mean, sometimes there can be this tendency, if we have like full control over the program, to just be a little softer or a little more lenient, and I think we can provide safety and a shame-free experience while still holding high expectations. So for example, like if we have a young person showing up to a shift under the influence, it actually doesn't serve them to just let them keep working. If that's something they're going to run into out in the community at a different job, that's something that they would be sent home for, right? And so we get to kind of do that in a really safe environment and talk with them about that. But not doing that, I think we tried that for a while, to just kind of say like, oh, it's okay, or we'll give them a warning, you know, like that kind of stuff. But just really giving the young person as much information as possible, like entrusting them with as many details of, you know, this is how a progressive discipline process works in employment, right? This is what that might sound like. This is what that might feel like. Here's how you can engage well in that process. And giving them that information as early as possible so that it has time to kind of like plant itself so that they can think about it during their experience.
Awesome. Thank you, Robin. John, how about for y'all? Lessons learned for maintaining employment and income?
Well, I think one big adjustment that we made was to really hone in and focus on working with youth very proactively when they first start getting employed around communications, really just distinguishing how professional communication should go, how professional decision-making should go, trying to help them kind of raise their level of emotional intelligence. That way they can survive in the workplace and then not lose that job. And a big part of our focus is just trying to teach them how to delay the response to any work-related stress that they experience, and just helping them to understand that the nature of those relationships is very different than how they might handle relationships in their personal lives. So we kind of tell every kid, like, yeah, in the workplace, it's not unusual to want to tell a peer or supervisor to F off. But, you know, in the professional workplace, the translation for that is, okay, I'll think on that and get back to you tomorrow. So, yeah, we'll usually do that about 3 to 4 times per week, really probing the youth what relationship stressed you, and targeting a couple of relationships within the workplace, mostly their supervisor, so that authority figure, but also the peer that you know, their peer that's kind of driving them nuts in the workplace as well, and customers. Customers are always a difficult one for a lot of our youth to manage. And so we'll also step up other interventions over time too, depending on what some of the signs and symptoms are that they might be close to losing that job. So we might start showing up at their place in the morning to make sure that they're getting up, they're getting out on time, transporting them. So a lot of things like that. We understand that their motivation to maintain work at times is kind of in an ebb and flow. Sometimes it's tied to mental health as well. And just really trying to wrap our program around that piece of it.
That's great. Thank you. I think we all could use those lessons about employee relationships. Laura, how about for y'all at Bill Wilson Center, techniques, lessons learned about helping young people maintain employment and income?
Yeah, so just piggybacking on some of the things that John just said, you know, really using the relationship that you've built with a staff person, with a client that you're working with, to understand what their challenges have been. So if they've been employed in the past, what didn't work so well at those jobs, and then having that proactive plan, like from the moment they get the job. Okay, so it seems like if you know you have a youth who has an explosive temper, then you know that it's going to be an issue for them at the job. So then you have to have that proactive conversation to say, so when somebody is pissing you off, when you are faced with that person who's driving you crazy, how do you respond? How do you get through the day? How do you get to your break? And then what do you do on your break to manage it? And so we've had clients that, you know, call their case manager on their break and, you know, scream and yell for 15 minutes to vent and then be able to go back to work. Or how do they hold on to it until the end of the day so that they can have an opportunity to vent? So really sort of just pinpointing what are each youth's struggle is going to potentially be, because some youth, it is the time management, getting up and making sure you get to work. For youth that are using substances, you know, getting up in the morning can be difficult. And so having those conversations too, like, okay, so if you're going to go out and drink with your friends or smoke with your friends, how are you going to get up in the morning? And so really, again, like being proactive, and then just, and then being upfront about it. Like, you know, the things that are probably going to be challenging for them. And so just having that honest conversation about how do we plan for this? It's not that any of those behaviors, maybe they have to change, maybe they don't have to change, but how are you going to manage them in your life, and just doing what you can. And then when things aren't going well at a job, what do you do to help them maintain it? But then how do you also just proactively start looking for something else so that maybe they'll have a transition from one job to the other rather than that employment disruption, which does happen, and then you just have to go right back out there. But if you see it coming down the line, how do you, you know, say, okay, let's start looking for something else, because this might not last very long.
Awesome. Thank you. That's all great, great advice. And again, thank you all for hanging in for a little bit longer than we were originally scheduled for. This is such an important topic, and I'm glad we have a little bit of extra time to devote to it. I want to ask one more quick question before we end today. We had several questions, and this again, there's a really good parallel here with landlords and rapid rehousing, and it's about employer engagement. What are employers getting out of these partnerships with your program, out of working with young people who have experienced homelessness? How do you sell this to employers? How do we sell opportunity youth to employers? So if each of you really quickly, actually Chris or Katie, if you want to throw out a really quick one, just like in the general bigger picture about what employers get out of working with opportunity youth, and then we'll go with each one of the providers.
Sure. This is Katie. I can jump in just a little bit quickly here. Two things. I think in general, when we think about young people, and especially young people who have experienced homelessness, one strength that comes up just again and again is around young people's resilience. And I think that resilience is a quality that is certainly important across one's lifespan and also within the workforce. And I think that any employer should be open to the idea of employing a young person who's really putting themselves out there, who's been through challenges and who's overcome those challenges, and who's, again, continuing to move forward, and that in many ways that ties into the qualities of what would be a good employee. Two other things I would add, again, if you're in a position where you can refer or offer someone that kind of social enterprise, experiential learning, transitional jobs experience, the employer is working with someone who has a recent work history, a resume, a letter of reference, and finally just the supports that you as a rapid rehousing program can provide to that young person. So a lot of the stuff that the providers just mentioned, you can basically tell an employer, like, we have this young person's back to make sure that they're getting to work, that they're proactively addressing problems that might arise on the workplace, that, you know, they have access to those other supports that they need to be successful, and that really can be almost a HR function for employers.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, and for our provider panel, lightning round here. What are employers getting out of working with your program and the young people that you assist? Let's see, Laura, we'll go backwards this time. You want to kick us off?
Yeah, I agree with everything that was just said, and I think that the other thing is that you're working with a young person, and I think that sometimes you can sort of sell that to the employer as they're looking for somebody who they want to like fit into their place. And so I think in addition to being resilient, I think that young people can also be very moldable, and so I think that you're sort of getting the person that you can kind of train them and bring them up to be how you want them to be, is one of the things that we use as a selling point.
Awesome, thank you. John, how about for y'all? What are employers getting?
Yeah, I'd echo that sentiment exactly, that I think it's just having this moldable individual that you can work with, and also kind of having the off-the-clock assistance through the case manager's follow-up, and then how we can kind of help fuse that relationship.
Great, thank you. Robin, how about for y'all?
Yeah, I think the parallel is like you talked about, Mindy, just like with landlords, it's knowing that the youth has support, and employers, I'd say it's that they know youth has support. For us, also, we've had most success with local businesses and kind of small business owners, and a part of that is that they get to say that they're really helping the community in this unique way, and can kind of highlight that partnership. We've had a lot of small business local employers who have talked about that as a reason that they partner with us.
Awesome, thanks, Robin. And DeShonda, we'll give you the last word on this one. And I think what you'll have to say is super important, given that you have done this, survey of your employers, and that mistrust of young people is there. So how do you sell Pathfinders and your young people to employers? What are they getting out of it?
We definitely echo what everyone else has said, especially because these are young people that have been surviving long before we came into their lives. And so there's a lot of talents and skills naturally that they have to offer. And with support, we're able to help enhance and increase that. We're able to build a better economy, a better environment. These are typically young people that either take care of themselves, their siblings, or their households. And you can, like someone just said earlier, you can help mold them, you can train them, and you can have a long-term employer. I was a young person when I started, and so I'm a prime example of how you can have someone in your program and they can grow and they can be a staff person, they can be the expert. I have clients, had clients that are now staff and can model that same picture, that these are folks that can become experts in your business, in your agency, and can take over the way that you want them to because of mentorship. Mentorship works, and we know that they already bring something to the table that as we get older, a lot of us use and don't have anymore, because it's not as fresh and we're not as, in that generation as young folks are. And I think on the end note, young people are supposed to be the future. So you need to give them permission. You need to give them the opportunity to take on those roles in society. So.
Absolutely. And I am still fresh, by the way. Okay. What a great discussion, everybody. We could definitely keep this conversation going, and maybe we need to think about having a number 2 version of this webinar. I did commit to shorter webinars this year for the learning community, and obviously I have failed in that commitment, but we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. Thanks again to all of you incredible youth rapid rehousing providers, employment experts from Heartland Alliance for being part of this learning community. And I'm sorry we weren't able to get to all the great questions, everybody. We have started to compile all of the unanswered questions from all these webinars, and we're going to put them together into one document. We'll get that out to everybody in the learning community as soon as it's complete. Also, please note that for next month, it's the Alliance's National Conference on Ending Homelessness, so we won't have our next online meeting until August. We don't have the date for that yet, but I will be sending out a save the date in the newsletter follow-up from this webinar, and that newsletter will also include links to all the great employment resources that Heartland Alliance has developed. And finally, just one more minute for an important advocacy opportunity for everybody. As you all know by now, voting on the proposed Senate health care bill will be delayed until after Congress returns from the July 4th recess. It's really great that that bill didn't go through yet, but the fight is not over to save Medicaid, which is a vital resource for health care and supportive services for people experiencing homelessness, including young people. So you all can join the Alliance and my wonderful cat Lush, who is in that GIF, in that fight with just a couple clicks and calls, and the Alliance makes it really easy with our new online advocacy tool. That address is on the screen now, and we will also have that in the newsletter that goes out to you. Thank you, Lush. So that's it for today, folks. As always, reach out to me anytime you have questions or ideas about youth rapid rehousing or the learning community. And if you're going to be here in DC for the Alliance Conference next month, we do have a dedicated workshop on youth rapid rehousing, and I'd love for you to come by and introduce yourself if we haven't met yet in person. Thanks again for joining us today, for being a part of the Alliance's 2017 Rapid Rehousing for Youth Learning Community. If I don't see you at the conference, we'll see you in August with more great youth rapid rehousing content and more great cat pictures. Goodbye, everybody.